I've helped hundreds of families navigate through college recruiting, and just in the last 30 days, we've generated hundreds of conversations with college coaches, and a big piece of that has been social media. So I just kind of wanted to show you what we've been learning and what's been working for us. I'm specifically going to talk mostly about Twitter or X. I think it's Twitter still. But a lot of these principles apply to Instagram as well. So if you're on Instagram, then a lot of these you'll be able to still use. But we use Twitter mostly. There are coaches on both platforms. I don't like to play the game of like which coaches are on which platform. I think there are other places that you could spend your time in college recruiting that are going to be more worth it for you. So instead, I'm just going to focus on Twitter. And if you're on Instagram, take some of this stuff over there. Okay. So there's a few different things that we're trying to accomplish with social media. Primarily, it's generating interest and building interest. Converting interest is really going to happen mostly off of social media with the exception of posts to the timeline. So posts to the timeline will be a version of converting interest. There's a couple other things that we can do there, but I don't know that we can cover those in this video. There's just not enough time. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about. First thing is generating interest. There's a few different ways that you can generate interest using social media. The first one is the most underrated, and that's following coaches. It's critical that you follow the coaches themselves and not the program accounts. The program accounts are run by marketing people who don't really have any say in who's getting scholarships, who's getting roster spots. And so instead you want to follow the specific coaches. Now, following these coaches is like low-hanging fruit. This is one of the simplest things you can do because when you follow a coach, they're going to check their notifications and see that someone followed them. Then they're going to see who it is that followed them. And when they go to your kid's profile, and let's just say it's a 2026 striker, then if that coach needs a 2026 striker and they're actively recruiting for that position in grad class, they're going to look at your kid's profile. And if they start going through the videos, stop right there. That's exactly what you're trying to accomplish with a DM, with an email, and all it took to get there was clicking a button, was clicking the follow button. And so this is one of the easiest things that you can do to start generating interest in college recruiting. The other thing that you can do with the follow button that a lot of people don't do is you should go and optimize your recruiting profile on social media. Okay, I don't believe in recruiting profiles outside of social media. I don't think you need it. We don't use it, and we generate a lot of interest in offers. But your social media profile can act as a recruiting profile. And so what I would do is I would go beef that up, like improve your bio, improve your pin tweet, improve your content, improve all of those little things, and then unfollow the coaches that you're following and refollow them. So then you get a second notification, you get another look at your profile. One of the easiest things that you can do that nobody really talks about or does. Okay, that's the first thing. Second way you can generate interest is through DMs. Now, there's a couple different kinds of DMs that you can use here. We're only going to talk about really two of them, but there's lots of different ones that you can use. The first one is outreach, and that's just cold outreach to schools who don't know who you are, coaches who aren't following you, and that's still a good thing to do. It's very similar to email in a lot of ways. The challenge is that a lot of coaches have their DMs blocked, so you're not going to be able to reach every coach there, which is why it's important that you communicate via multiple channels, like email as well. But DMs are still a great way to communicate with college coaches, and there are, in fact, some coaches who prefer to communicate on social media. If your kid plays football, by the way, then this is an incredibly important video for you because Twitter is going to be the most important platform for you. More important than email, more important than anything else for you. Twitter is where football recruiting happens. Now, if your kid doesn't play football, it's still critical that you understand this and you use social media because you will get more interest in offers if you do. Okay. And then there's another kind of DM, but we're going to talk about that in a second. And then the third one is timeline posts. Okay. We're going to talk about timeline posts. Actually, let's just do it now because I think that this makes the most sense. So timeline posts are like the lottery. And here's what I mean by that. When you try to win the lottery, you don't buy one ticket and hope that it wins, right? People go and they buy 100 tickets. And what ends up happening is that 99 of those 100 tickets don't win anything. They don't do anything for you, but one of those tickets gives you outsized returns. And so one of those tickets generates a whole bunch of money for you, way more than you lost for the other 100 or 99 tickets, right? That is what timeline posts are like. When you make one post on social media, it is unlikely that that post is going to generate a whole bunch of interest and change your recruiting process overnight. Right? And then you make a second one, it's unlikely that that's going to happen there too. And you go down, and this happens for every single post. right? And so what happens is that a lot of people make posts on social media, they don't see any traction, and they're like, man, this doesn't work. You don't understand the purpose of timeline posts, right? There's two purposes: lottery, and then you also have what I'm going to call nurture. And maybe I shouldn't be trying to spell this out because that's hard for me to write. But lottery and nurture. Nurture is for coaches who are already following you and you are simply providing them more video and more evidence that your kid is a good player. And then the other one is lottery. If you're going to do lottery, you have to commit to basically making 100 posts, right? Not 5 or 10, because what's going to happen is the first 40 are not going to do anything for you, and then some random one here is going to get 10,000 views and might get 5 or 10 interested schools overnight. And so if you want to play the lottery with timeline posts, you have to play it right. You have to make a lot of posts, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. Okay, so those are really the 3 ways that you can generate interest with social media. Now, all of these things, you are pointing them to video. That is the purpose. You want college coaches to watch your kids' video, whether they're following them, right? You follow the coach, they look at your profile. Guess what they're going to look at? Your kid's video. When you are sending DMs, the purpose should not be stats. It should be video. And I have a lot of videos about that. I'm not going to talk about that now because it's really controversial and it would take me a long time. I've made singular videos that are like 30 minutes long just about that topic. Trust me on this one. We generate a lot of interest for players. Send them to video. And then timeline posts, you're mostly posting about video. You might be able to post, photos, schedules, stuff like that. But most of the content you're going to be posting is a video. Okay. Now, what happens when you post that video? Well, there's really 2 ways that coaches can take this on social media. They can either follow your kid, or if they really like what they see, they might start a conversation. Now, let's start with conversation because it's easier to explain. If a coach starts a conversation with your kid on social media, meaning they either DM your kid back or they text them, call them, something like that, maybe even send them an email, right? But they start a conversation. That's when you want to begin a follow-up sequence. Follow-up sequence is simply where you continue to build a relationship with the coach. We do this through a couple different ways, but you're primarily going to be doing this, through either the DMs. If you already are in contact with the school on social media, then just keep the conversation there. If they contact you some other way, then you should keep that wherever that conversation is already happening. If it's email, keep emailing them. If it's text, keep it on text. If it's phone, continue with phone, right? But the point is that you should be following up with those schools if you have a conversation. And then the second one here is follow. So the point is, I talked about DMs and I said there's really 2 kinds of DMs that we're going to talk about here today. There's lots of kinds of DMs, but there's 2 here today. The first one was outreach to coaches who don't know who your kid is. The second one is coaches who follow your kid. If a coach follows your kid, you need to do something with that. You have to do something with that because it's really unlikely that they are going to turn into an offer down the road if you don't nurture that lead. And so when a coach follows your kid, you have to do what I call hot cognition. This is a sales word. And basically what that means is you want to strike while the iron is hot. And that means you contact that school immediately. A follow is the lowest level of interest. Do I have hierarchy of interest on here somewhere? I don't know that I do. I'm not seeing it. Is this hierarchy of interest? No. Okay. I don't have hierarchy of interest on here. The general principle behind a hierarchy of interest is that not all interest is the same. Social media interest is the lowest level of interest, right? We'll put SM here. This is the lowest level of interest. It's not nothing. Coaches aren't following players that they think suck. That's not happening. But at the same time, it's not the highest level of interest. This might be like a DM, where you actually have a conversation, or an email, you have some back and forth. Then you might have like text or phone call. Then you might have a visit. Then you might have an offer, right? And you're trying to ascend coaches through the hierarchy of interest. And so social media is the lowest level, specifically a follow, is the lowest level of interest. It's not nothing, but you have to get coaches to the next level. You got to get them to the DM level, right? And so what we need to do is, as soon as they express that interest, you have to contact them immediately. Because it's the lowest level of interest, there's a good chance that if you don't contact them for 4 weeks, then in 4 weeks, when you send them a message, they're going to be like, who is this kid? They're not going to know because they aren't going to remember your name. But if you contact them the same day, they're going to be like, oh, this is the kid I followed this morning. The odds of them responding are significantly higher. So you want to contact them immediately. hopefully in the DMs, right? And then if they transition things from the DMs, like if DMs are blocked, you can't get to them for whatever reason, then you can email them instead. And then the other thing you can do is you can tag them in a post within 3 days. You want to use tags very sparingly because most of the time you just don't want to be publicly saying who it is that you're talking to like that. Yes, you want to be doing that in private, behind closed doors, but it's just a bad look to do that publicly on social media. Yes, there are times where you want to post about visits and offers and stuff, but that's a very different conversation. Just trust me on the tags. Okay. So you want to DM those schools immediately. And if you haven't heard from them, you can tag them in a post within 3 days. Use that sparingly. Okay. But the point is that we need to ascend coaches through the hierarchy of interest. We need to take that follow and turn it into a conversation. Okay. The next piece of this is that you want to build interest. Okay, so there's really 2 ways that you do that. The first is through timeline posts. Remember when we talked about the lottery and I said there's 2 ways that you can really use the timeline posts. It's for the lottery and it's for nurturing coaches. We're talking about nurturing coaches right now. These are coaches who are following you, but they have not given you an offer yet, right? So you want to continue to post to the timeline, keep them updated with what's going on with your kid. The second thing is your bio. And so ideally what happens is your bio pushes them to another nurturing place. In this case, we use YouTube and we use it hardcore. Okay. And so we have a ton of video on YouTube. We've created an entire experience for coaches to make it really easy for them to evaluate a player. And so we want to take them from Twitter and push them to a YouTube channel or something like that. Okay. And so that's really the whole point of building interest on Twitter is we need to get coaches to the next level. Whatever that next level is in terms of the hierarchy of interest, we got to take them to the next level. By the way, when we talk about timeline posts, the most important thing is recency. So you are trying to showcase content that is happening in the recent days, right? Or weeks. The longer back the content is in terms of the video that you have or whatever it is that you're posting about, the less effective it is. It's best if it's within the last week, right? You're posting video, you're posting any like academic awards that maybe you win or some kind of other award. These are all types of content, but the whole idea is that it should be recent. It should be things that have happened soon or recently, because that's what coaches are really going to care about. Okay. Now, when we talk about converting interest, this is where follow-ups come into play. There's a lot into converting interest. We could talk for a very long time about that. I think this is like the most forgotten part of college recruiting, which is why I think a lot of services and families struggle. But this is a really important piece. Social media plays a small piece with DMs here and maybe some nurturing with like timeline posts, but we got to have another conversation about that because I'm not going to be able to go into that now. Okay. So this is generally what social media looks like. There's a couple other things that I want to talk about though, because I think it's important. So the first one is part of the reason that social media is important is because it's just one piece of a bigger puzzle. So when you do something, for instance, like send emails, which you absolutely should, when you do that, a coach might not be ready to respond to your email because they just learned about your kid 5 seconds ago. And so they might say, yeah, the kid's video is good. I think they're pretty good. We're recruiting their grad class in position, but I'm not ready to open dialogue with them yet. So what they might do is they might not respond to your email, but they go follow your kid on social media instead. And so when we go back to the hierarchy of interest, they decline to do this. Let's say this is also email, right? They decline to do this right now, and they decide to downgrade to following your kid on social media. That's fine. But now we got to be able to take this and move it upward, right? Back to that next level. And so it's a big ask to get a college coach to respond to an email right away. Do we get it? Yeah, all the time. We get that, but not every coach is going to be ready. And so it's like asking someone to be your boyfriend or girlfriend on the first date. Does it happen? Yes. Is it common? No, right? And I would say that actually, getting email responses is a little more common than this, but it depends on how good you are at email. Point is that a follow on Twitter or Instagram is a much smaller ask. The coach is basically saying, let me just keep this player around. Like I want to keep an eye on them kind of thing. And so then your goal is to take them to the next stage of interest. And so now it's still better that you have that social media option because they're still in your ecosystem. If you don't have social media, you lose that option. It is all or it is nothing. That's a risky game to play. That's why even if your kid doesn't play football, it's critical that you have some piece of social media available. because it's a downgrade. It's an in-between option. You're going to keep more coaches in your ecosystem, and that is going to lead to more offers. Okay. So when we talk about this, there's different stages of interest. And so I just mentioned the hierarchy of interest, but real quick, I just want to show you what a workflow for this might look like. Okay. So in the beginning, a college coach has no idea that your kid exists. That's where most people are. And so what you need to do is get them to at least acknowledge that your kid is a human being and exists. Let's say, for instance, you do that with email. Okay. Now, what happens is they might be intrigued and they don't respond because we just talked about how that might not happen. And instead, they follow your kid on Twitter. And so they're intrigued, right? Your job is to take them to genuinely interested. This is when they're actively still looking for other players. They might be recruiting, they might be genuinely interested in 5 or 10 other players for your kid's position in grad class. You are now in direct competition with those 5 to 10 other players. And your job is to separate the gap between your kid and all of those other players. And so this is typically where we talk about follow-ups. So this period where we said, converting interest, maybe even building interest, that's this period right here, okay? Even a little bit here. And then they move to seriously interested. This is where they have 2 to 3 players that they are actually considering. And now they're getting really, really small and granular on what they're looking for and the differences in those players. And so this is where converting and building interest is really important. And then eventually they get to the point where they're 100% sure and you get the cash, right? That's what that's all about. So those are the different stages of interest. And so social media plays this integral role where it's an in-between option. It's another communication channel. And the more places that coaches can find you and find your kid, the more likely they are to do something about that, right? To see that your kid exists, to evaluate them, recruit them, all of those good things. And so we've been having a ton of success lately on social media, and I think it's a channel that a lot of people just don't really know that much about. I don't really know that many people that are getting deep into what social media should actually look like. And I think it's really important because the more intentional you are about it, the better results you're going to see for it. So anyway, I hope that this was helpful. If you're the parent of a high school athlete and your kid is, struggling in recruiting process right now and you want help, click the link in the bio or in the description, I guess, and you can schedule a call with us and we'll walk you through what we do. But otherwise, I'll see you guys next time.